it's Reagan and today I'm filming my November wrap-up. Now for the month of November, I have to say it was a pretty good reading month for me. I read a total of 5 books, and all of which were pretty lengthy, I have to say. I read the first 4 books actually in the first 2 weeks of the month, while the last book took me the last 2 weeks, not because it wasn't amazing, but because #college got in the way. As I'm sure many of you can relate with school and other things during this time of the year, it's busy. It's a busy time. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with my wrap-up. The very first book I completed this month was The Stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen. This is a fantasy novel that I feel is pretty unique just based on the premise. Essentially, it follows our main character who is a fantastic singer. She has dreams of moving to the city and just pursuing that career path. On her way to the city, actually, she's actually kidnapped and sold to trolls that live underground. And you're probably like, trolls? And I'm like, yeah, trolls. I've never read a book about trolls before. This is definitely my first time. And it was very interesting. The reason why she sold off to the trolls is because they believe that she can break the curse on them that's keeping them contained underground. I actually really liked this book. I thought it was a great first installment to a trilogy. I believe it's a trilogy. It definitely had a really great slow burning and angsty romance. It had a very interesting political nature. There's a lot of different political factions going on in the story, not to mention some interesting social aspects, as there are half-trolls and real trolls, so there's this issue of basically them treating half-trolls like slaves, and then humans even worse than slaves. Overall, I really liked this book. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm excited to continue on with the rest of the series. I haven't heard much about this on BookTube at all, so if this interests you, I definitely recommend picking it up. It was good. It was in fact quite good. The next book I finished was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. And this is Patrick Ness's newest release and follows the idea/premise of basically there's that hero, that chosen one who gets picked and they seemingly live an ordinary life, then they have to go and save the world. Well, this book follows that world, but instead of following the hero or the chosen one, it follows all the people that just live there and have to deal with all the craziness that kind of is surrounding their town. The idea is that even to these people, while the end of the world is seemingly happening, their real life problems are a much bigger deal to them. Overall, I say the premise of this book is probably better than the execution. Don't get me wrong, I really loved this book. I love Patrick Ness's writing, but this is probably my least favorite book of his I've read. Maybe because it leans very much contemporary fiction and it doesn't have a lot of his usual science fiction or dystopian flair. Perhaps. But I will say this book has some really interesting satire humor. Basically, the story of the hero is played out in the chapter heads, and it's basically just like a stereotyped, very short version of what a normal YA novel would be. This is definitely a good book. If you like Patrick Ness, or if you think this book sounds interesting to you, I would still pick it up. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, it wasn't my favorite thing Patrick Ness has ever written, but I still recommend it just because he's such a fantastic author, and I'm sure a lot of people would still really like this. The next book I read was absolutely amazing, and it was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. Look at me following the lists I actually made this month. But yeah, this is a historical fiction novel, and it's following the exportation of Lithuanians out of Lithuania to Siberia, and basically they were deemed criminals by the Soviet state. This book was heartbreaking, fascinating, and again, heartbreaking. It's an extremely fast read. The chapters are very short, and for me, I didn't know very much about this Lithuanian refugee export of criminals, war criminals, during World War II, and it was just such a new and interesting perspective for me, and clearly this book was very well researched, and it was just so interesting and so heartbreaking. Specifically, this book follows our main character. She's a young teenage girl who's into art. She's going to go to art school, very talented, comes from a very loving family until her world falls apart and they're packed up and sent to Siberia. She's with her mother and her very young little brother. It's a fantastic story of hope, struggle, but also perseverance and just holding on and being so unbelievably strong. Yeah, just like the stories of these refugees completely astounded me. Some of these people, they were arrested, but because they were sent to the Soviet state and the Soviet Union obviously persisted after the end of World War II, some of these Lithuanian refugees were in prison for no reason for upwards of 15 years. the war ended, but they were still there. Mind-boggling. But yeah, this story I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. I highly recommend it if you haven't picked it up. It took me a really long time to pick it up and I regret it. So I'm telling you, if you're interested, read it. It's definitely worth your time. The next book I read was Perustopia's book club pick of the month, which by the way, we'll have a live show for on December 4th at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. This is Rainbow Rowell's first foray into fantasy and is her newest release. Basically, it follows the fictional story Simon and Baz based off of Harry Potter that was present in her other book, Fangirl, and this is like the completed 7th novel of that fictional series. I have to say I really enjoyed this book. It definitely housed a lot of Rainbow Rowell's beautiful writing that just feels homey and you can kind of just crawl inside and live in her stories. It really just feels comfortable to read her books. Specifically, I thought the story was quite clever. I enjoyed the magic system. I thought the characters were fun and witty. But I will say, and I will definitely talk about this more in the live show, so if you want more of my specific thoughts, please go there. But the reason why I couldn't give this book 5 stars is because something about the fact that it relies on the existence of another book series to really understand it fully and to kind of get everything that's going on, I couldn't give it 5 stars because of that. Like, if Harry Potter didn't exist, this book wouldn't be able to exist either. It wouldn't make sense. You can't just release a 7th book in a series without relying on all of us knowing kind of the tropes and things that exist in Harry Potter. So because of that, I gave it a 4.5 stars, 4.25 stars. I really liked it. I think it's a great read, but it's not as good as Harry Potter, people. Jeez. And the last book I completed this month, I literally finished all of 30 minutes ago, and it is my favorite book I read this month, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. That is right, people, I finally freaking read it. And yes, it was just as amazing as I thought it would be, if not more. So if you're not aware, The Name of the Wind is an epic fantasy trilogy, I want to say. This is the first installment. And the way the story is constructed is that we follow our main character much later in life, but he is telling his story in parts to a chronicler. He's writing it down, he's telling about all of his adventures of his life. This first book follows his childhood up until his mid-years in university, and I freaking loved it. First off, the magic system in this book is just astounding. The writing literally pulls you in. Like, the first 50 pages I was like, this is kind of slow, this is so long, and then you reach a point and you're like, never mind, all I want to do is read this book, but I don't have time because school. The main character, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I call him Cove, to be honest. I don't know if that's wrong. But I really loved him as a character because he's witty, he's sarcastic, he's flawed, and he's also a genius. And I'm sorry, one of my absolute favorite tropes and situations totally happened in this book, and it follows a genius prodigy boy going to school at a magic school. It's all I want, really, in life. It's like my favorite thing to read about, and it totally happened in this, and it was just amazing. I cannot wait to pick up the second book of this trilogy. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I have to wait for the third one, but I guess I'll figure it out when that happens. But obviously I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. If you're intimidated by the size, I implore you to try it anyway. It is not complicated fantasy. In fact, it just has a beautiful story, and it has amazing characters, and it's written beautifully. It's great. It's fantastic. It's so good, people. So good. Alright guys, that is my November wrap up. I really read some amazing books this month that I'm very excited about. Let me know down below some books you read this month that you also loved, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!